Get ready for Tennessee's next game on the hardwood with our Vols matchup breakdown. We preview the Vols opponent and give you Tennessee's keys to victory here on Vol Basketball Fever. Welcome in everyone to another Vol basketball matchup breakdown video here on Vol Basketball Fever. I'm Nathanael Rutherford here to give you a breakdown of Tennessee's next game in men's basketball against the formidable and often thought about and trash talked about Auburn Tigers, who is coached by Bruce Pearl. All fans know about him here in Tennessee. More on that in just a second. I want to say thank you all so much for tuning in here for this video. Please give this video a like and please subscribe to our channel while you're here. We'd really appreciate that. And please give your comments down below. Give your thoughts on this game, on this matchup, score predictions, Tennessee, what you think they need to do to win this game. If you think Tennessee wins this game, why you think Auburn wins this game, just any and all thoughts down below in the comments. Would really, really appreciate that. We'll do our best to reply back to you guys as well and give our comments to your comments. Also, subscribe to our podcast. The podcast is here on the YouTube channel as well. It's the Vol Basketball Fever podcast and Lady Vol Basketball Fever podcast. But if you don't want to subscribe to it on YouTube, you can check it out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there. And leave us a review. Leave us a nice 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. But diving in here to the game, Tennessee versus Auburn at 4 o'clock Eastern on ESPN on Saturday. It's a huge game. Auburn number 1 right now in the SEC. Tennessee in the top 4 looking for that double bye. Right now, Tennessee, I believe, is 4th in the SEC currently. Still pretty solid locked in there, but they can't afford too many losses. And this would be a huge win for Tennessee because it would be a win against the number 1 team in the SEC, but it'd be a really nice resume win for Tennessee to go along with some of the other ones they have against Arizona, against LSU, against Kentucky. It'd be a nice little padding there to go along with an already very solid resume Tennessee has for the NCAA tournament. All right, let's go ahead and get this out of the way, get this talking point out of the way at the beginning here. Let's just acknowledge that Bruce Pearl has owned Rick Barnes at Tennessee, and while both these guys have been in the SEC. And actually, if you want to go back a little bit, yeah, Bruce Pearl even beat Rick Barnes while Barnes was at Texas and Pearl's at Tennessee. If you remember that huge, incredible shot that Chris Lofton had over Kevin Durant in that game, that was Rick Barnes as Texas head coach and Bruce Pearl as Tennessee's head coach. But if you look at just exclusively in the SEC, since taking over at Auburn, Bruce Pearl is now 7-4 against Tennessee and has won 6 straight meetings against the Vols. So he's actually started out 1-4 against Tennessee in his first few years there at Auburn, but has won 6 straight games. Some of those have been close. Some of those have not been so close. Tennessee hasn't beaten Auburn in 5 years. The Tigers haven't lost Tennessee in 5 years. That's not something I would have ever thought in men's basketball, but that's what Bruce Pearl has done with this Auburn Tiger basketball program. Has really kind of turned their fortunes around for being definitely a cellar dweller in the SEC for years, especially when I was growing up, to now suddenly, they've won the SEC regular season before, they've won the SEC tournament, they've been to Final Four. This year, they also look very stacked and loaded and have, to me, the undeniable number 1 pick in the NBA draft as well. Speaking of kind of the program this year, Auburn was once the number 1 team in the country. They held that distinction for, I think, 3, if not 4 weeks on the year before losing and falling out of it. Now they're still a top 5 team, but no longer number 1 in the country. They were playing really, really, really good basketball in December and in January, and that got them the number 1 ranking. But kind of since then, since they climbed to number 1, Auburn hasn't been playing their best. They haven't maintained that level of play that got them to number 1. If you remember back when Tennessee was number 1 just a few seasons ago, kind of the same thing happened there. Maybe not quite to the same degree, but Tennessee that season had played really well and climbed to number 1. Beat Gonzaga and got some really quality wins up until that point as well. They got number 1, and then it seemed like they weren't playing the same way once they got to number 1, and not to the same heights that they were playing before their number 1. Auburn now hasn't been playing their best ball. They were 18-1 and had just beaten Kentucky 80-71 at home when they were crowned number 1. And then the very first game after that, in very Bruce Pearl fashion, just like we did with Tennessee, almost lost the very first game after they brought the team to number 1 for the first time in their program history. They immediately followed up getting number 1 with a ugly 55-54 win on the road against Missouri of all teams. I remember watching that, and a lot of you probably watched that too, and some really bad clock management by Missouri late in that game. Other decisions really cost the Tigers. Auburn was able to escape that one with a 1-point win. Then they handled Oklahoma and Alabama at home after that. But then they looked really bad against Georgia on the road and then lost to Arkansas in overtime on the road that Tuesday. And that's what made them fall from the number 1 ranking at that point. Since then, they've also struggled against Vanderbilt and lost to Florida on the road. They haven't played like incredible competition over the last few weeks, and they've kind of struggled against some of the teams they've been playing, especially on the road. In Auburn's first 7 SEC games this year, they averaged 80 points per game and only gave up 67.6 points per game. But over the last 8 SEC games, they've averaged just 76.6 points and have allowed 69 points. So the defense hasn't changed too much. That's that offense that's dropped off a lot. They're averaging about 3.5 points less per game over the last 8 SEC games than they did their first 7. And I think it's maybe even more drastic if you look at their last 3 or 4 SEC games as well. In the 19 games leading up to them being voted number 1 in the AP poll, Auburn had recorded an overall offensive efficiency rating on KenPom of at least 115 in 8 of those 19 games. So a pretty good chunk of those games. But over the last 9 games, Auburn has eclipsed that 115 mark on offensive efficiency just 3 times. So 33% as opposed to, actually pretty darn close to being half there of 8 of 19. So it's not a precipitous drop off. It's not like wow, all of a sudden they're playing like garbage. But there is definitely a difference between the way Auburn has played here in February as what they're playing in December and January. So you'd be crazy to deny that, I think. I'm not saying that they're all of a sudden a bad team. Just there's a difference. There's a difference in the way Auburn has been playing lately as opposed to how they were playing when they got to number 1 and the first, not first week, but really since they got to number 1. In fact, according to Haslametrics.com, which is a site I love to use, it's another analytics site like KenPom. I think I've had Eric Haslam on our podcast before. But according to Haslametrics, 3 of Auburn's worst overall performances in terms of his all-play rating that he has, in terms of efficiency, have come in the last month. And all 3 of those have been road games, at Missouri, at Georgia, and at Florida. Only one of those a loss, but still 3 of Auburn's top 5 worst performances overall, not just offense or defense, but just as a team, efficiency-wise, have come in the last month and have all been on the road against SEC opponents. Their momentum rating there on Haslametrics currently ranks 255th in the country. That's not very good. That's not a thing you really want to have in the bottom part of college basketball here as you're about to close out the month of March. Tennessee's momentum is noticeably higher, coming in at 114th. And I think that's been rising up a little bit more too because the Vols have been playing better lately, finally, it seems like. But again, Tennessee 114th in momentum as opposed to 255th for Auburn. And for context, there's like 358 Division I basketball programs, I believe. So to add a little more context to where that is, Tennessee's upper third, Auburn is middle, close to bottom third of that category there. This Tennessee team will be the highest rated team that Auburn has faced on the road this entire season. So they faced some high rated teams, at home and stuff, but actually on the road, the Vols will be easily the highest rated team that Auburn has faced. UT will be only the 2nd team actually ranked in the AP poll at the time Auburn's faced them on the road. So you think about that, they've only faced one other team that was actually ranked in the AP poll on the road this season when Auburn faced them. And UT's current ranking of 10th on KenPom and 9th in the net are easily the best Auburn's faced on the road this year. Their previous top road opponents have been Arkansas, who's currently 20th on KenPom and 23rd in net, and Alabama, who's currently 22nd in KenPom, and I believe also 22nd in the net. They might have moved it a little bit, but basically, what I'm saying, like barely top 20, top 25 teams are what Auburn has faced on the road as their best opponents. Tennessee is a top 10 team on KenPom and on the net rankings right now, and that's who Auburn's facing on the road this weekend. All 3 of Auburn's losses have come away from home this year as well. It's a neutral site versus UConn and both road games against Arkansas and Florida. So my point is, in bringing all this up, is to say Auburn's been phenomenal at home this year. They're undefeated. They've actually blown basically everybody out at home for the most part. I think their closest one, if I remember correctly, looking at the stats earlier before I started recording this, I believe the closest road or home victory they had all season was that Kentucky game where they won 80-71. They've been just dominant at home this year. On the road, it's a different story. All 3 of their losses, like I said, they've come away from home, one a neutral site, 2 in true road games. And in fact, here's another further breakdown to kind of talk about how different Auburn has been at home. In SEC games this year at home, Auburn is averaging 83 points per game while holding opponents to 67.8 points. Auburn is shooting 48.4% from the floor while holding opponents to a 37.9% field goal percentage at home this year. Their average margin of victory is 15.3 points at home this season in SEC play. On the road against league opponents, Auburn's averaging only 72.8 points, a whole 10 points different, averaging what they're offensively averaging on the road versus at home. Opponents are scoring 69 points per game, a little over 1 point higher, not a big difference there. It's really the offense that's been the huge difference for Auburn. They're only shooting 41.4% on the road against SEC teams. That's 7 percentage points difference than what they're shooting at home, while opponents are shooting 38.5% when Auburn faces them and they're on their home court, on the opposing team's home court, I should say. The average margin for Auburn in road games is just 3.7. That includes obviously 2 losses that were also very close, but 15.3 points is the average margin for Auburn at home and against SEC teams. On the road is 3.7. They are a different team on the road. I think it just seems like that way all season for the SEC. It seems like home teams have had a huge advantage this year in SEC play. Look at Tennessee. They're undefeated at home. Auburn's undefeated at home. Arkansas has 1 loss at home. I think Kentucky, I believe they're also undefeated at home. You have all these teams that are just playing really good at home, and playing on the road is very, I don't know if it had something to do with the fact that COVID was last year and maybe, players got used to not having a lot of fans there for the year. I don't know, but it just seems like there's a big home field advantage, or I guess home court advantage in SEC play this year. And Auburn, again, looks very different on the road, offensively especially. Not so much defense. Defense kind of travels for them, but that's the old adage is true there. But offensively, they've looked very different on the road this season, especially against SEC competition. Overall, Auburn hasn't really played the most difficult schedule of all time, but they have faced their fair share of tough teams. Tennessee will be the ninth. It'd be the 9th time that Auburn has played a team ranked in the top 30 on KenPom, and the 7th time they've faced a team ranked 22nd or better. I'm not saying top 20 because technically right now Alabama's 22nd. I think they should be included. They're right around the top 20, so you can say top 25, top 20, whatever. So close enough. But Auburn is 6-2 against those top kind of 20-ish teams, or top 30 teams, excuse me, and they're 4-2 against those top 20-ish teams. So they're 6-2 against teams ranked in the top 30 on KenPom, and 4-2 against those top 22, or whatever you want to say, top 20 teams on KenPom that they've faced this season. And despite all of this that I've said, Auburn is still a very, very talented and very, very difficult team to face. I'm not saying I think Tennessee is for sure going to win this game or going to blow them out or anything like that, but they're still a darn good team. They may have, their plays maybe not have been as good lately as it was at one point, and they struggle more on the road. That's true, like I said, pretty much every team in the SEC and every team in the NCAA this year. The road games are not easy, especially in league play. This Tigers team, again, still a very good team. They're one of just 8 teams in the country to be ranked both in the top 20 in both offensive and defensive efficiency on KenPom. They're ranked 8th on defense and I believe 15th on offense. So they're one of only 8 teams in the entire country who can boast that they have a top 20 offense and defense on KenPom. Speaking of the offense, kind of looking at how it's constructed, unlike previous Auburn teams under Bruce Pearl, this one isn't built on making a bunch of threes and running up and down the court. They do still have a pretty fast pace, with an adjusted tempo ranking 52nd in the country on KenPom. But actually a big reason why that tempo is the way it is actually because of their defensive pressure. Auburn's average opponent possession length is just 16.5 seconds, which ranks 19th in the country. Offensively, they're still, I think, top 100 on tempo, but still maybe not as much as you would expect in years past under Pearl, but still, they would still like to do a transition, still like to do their thing and running up and down the court. Offensively, though, speaking of them from years past being really good three-point shooting teams, this team's actually pretty mediocre in making threes, especially in conference play. They've connected on just 29.9%, so 30%, of their threes in SEC play, which ranks 10th in the conference. So 10th in the conference is, 5th worst in the conference in SEC play? So basically not quite 30% of their threes in SEC play this year. But they still put up a decent amount of triples, even though they don't make as many as they have in years past, averaging 23.4 a game in SEC play, which is the 4th most. But they're just making 7 of those, which is the 6th best, so it's not bad. It's top half, but in years past, Auburn's been a lot better at making threes than they have this year. But, that's because this team is built around Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler in the paint. And we know how elite those two have been this year. They're two of the best post players in all of college basketball, and I would be stunned if Jabari Smith is not the number one overall pick in the 2022 NBA draft. The team would be crazy to not take him number one overall. In my personal opinion, as an unprofessional draft analyst, I think Jabari Smith should be number one overall. Those two, Walker Kessler and Jabari Smith, are a huge reason Auburn leads the SEC in 2-point percentage, field goal percentage, and league play, as Auburn as a team is making 54.3% of their twos, and they lead the league in rebounding at 41.1 per game, and they also have the number one scoring offense in SEC play, averaging 78.2 points per game against league opponents. So again, Kessler and Smith are a huge reason why Auburn has had the success they've had offensively and defensively. Speaking of Smith, he is one of the most dangerous players in the entire country and has just a skill set that not very many people can boast they have in the entire world. He leads the team in scoring in SEC play at 15.8 per game and also averages 6.1 rebounds and 1.6 assists in SEC play. The 6'10" forward is Auburn's most dangerous three-point shooter as well, which is, again, not something you normally see, making 40.5% of his threes against SEC opponents. He's dropped 20 or more points in 10 games this season, including a 31-point performance against Vanderbilt just a week ago. And surprisingly, though, actually Auburn is 7-3 when he scores 20-plus points in a game. So all three of their losses have actually Jabari Smith scored 20 or more points, and they're undefeated when he doesn't reach 20 points. Not really entirely sure what that says about the team. I just thought it was a weird stat to kind of throw in there. They're 7-3 when he drops 20-plus points, but undefeated this season when he doesn't. So maybe Tennessee wants him to score 20 points. I don't know. Walker Kessler, on the other hand, he's a capable scorer, and he's definitely can put up some points, but he's known even more for his elite shot blocking and rebounding ability on defense and offense, both. For the rebounding, I mean. He's gotten a triple-double with points, rebounds, and blocks twice this season and has already set the Auburn school record for most blocks in a season. He did that on Wednesday, so he's already done that, and they still have a few more games left to play in the regular season, the SEC tournament, and then the NCAA tournament. I don't know if anyone's going to break that record by the time he's done playing this season. He has had 5 or more blocks in 13 of the 28 games he's played in, so almost half of the games he's played in, he's had 5 or more blocks this season. He's recorded 11 double-doubles on the year, with 8 of those coming in SEC play. So 8 double-doubles in SEC play for Walker Kessler. He's also extremely efficient. Again, he doesn't maybe score the most points on the team, but he's really efficient with his offense, making an eye-popping 69.7% of his shots in SEC play and 77.5% of his 2-point field goals. He's making over 3/4 of the field goals he attempts inside the 3-point line. He'll shoot a couple threes probably, and he's I think making like 23% or so on the year and on his threes, but 3/4 of his 2-point field goal attempts are going in. That's insane. That is an extremely efficient number. That has to be some sort of record for Auburn, at least, and maybe in SEC play as well. Getting Kessler in foul trouble could be key, though, looking at kind of historically this season when Kessler's gotten in foul trouble, as 2 of Auburn's 3 losses this year have come when he's had 4 or more fouls, or he's had 4 fouls or fouled out in the game this year. So again, that's not a huge correlation, but it is worth noting. If Tennessee maybe wants to have success with their post players or something, maybe getting Kessler in foul trouble early could really help that for Tennessee. Offensively, again, to go along with Kessler and Jabari Smith, Auburn has 3 small guards who kind of fit what you've looked at before with Auburn in years past under Bruce Pearl. 3 small guards who were going to be an interesting matchup for Tennessee and Tennessee small guards in this game. The 2 that really stand out are Wendell Green and Katie Johnson. Both those guys average double figures in scoring in SEC play, but neither one has been very good at shooting threes this year, with both making under 30% of their threes against league opponents. Both have also been struggling with consistency lately and with their shot, as Johnson especially has. He's averaging just 6.8 points and 2.4 turnovers, while shooting an abysmal 29.7% overall, not from 3, 29.7% overall from the floor, and making just 1 of his last 13 3-pointers over his last 5 games. So his shooting has been just dreadful over the last 5 games, making 1 of his 13 threes and not even making 30% of his shots overall over his last 5 games. Wendell Green hasn't been too much better. He did play better in Auburn's last game and looked pretty good against Ole Miss. But over his last 4 games, he's averaging 8.3 points on 30.6% shooting and just 26.3% shooting from 3. But he has averaged almost 6 assists per game in that stretch as well. So he's been dishing the ball and getting his teammates open and helping provide them with shots. So he's been doing some good things, but K.D. Johnson has definitely struggled. A couple of the names to keep an eye on for Auburn in this game as well. Allen Flanigan is great from inside the three-point line, just like a couple of Auburn's other players, making basically 57% of his 2-point shots in SEC play, while Devin Cambridge is connecting on 55.6% of his 2-point shots against SEC teams. But both have been subpar at shooting the 3, which just seems like the theme for most of Auburn's offense this year. But they can't help to crash the boards, as both are averaging above 3 rebounds per game. And I want to say that Cambridge is averaging about 4. So around 3.5 rebounds per game for both those guys. So they can help in other ways other than shooting threes, which is weird because Flanigan, I think in years past, has been really good as a 3-point shooter. It's interesting to see how not great of a team at shooting threes Auburn is this year when they've been really good in years past. Zeb Jasper, I'm not sure how you say his first name now, is the other guard to watch, another short guard, 6'1", as he starts while Wendell Green comes off the bench, even though Green plays more minutes and is a better overall player. Jasper is averaging 3.9 points and 1.5 assists in SEC play. He's actually pretty decent at hitting threes. He's making 38.5% of his threes in SEC play. One more guy to keep note of, all fans, is Dylan Cardwell. You might remember Tennessee was kind of interested in him in recruiting as a post guy. He's an energy guy off the bench who's about 6'10", 6'11", who plays in the post and will come off and, spell Walker Kessler down there at the 5 especially. He's definitely going to annoy Vol fans. K.D. Johnson and Cardwell both have really high energy and can be really crazy is not the right word, but kind of crazy a little bit. They're not Marshall Henderson by any means, but they're guys that, how Zakai Ziegler is for Tennessee and sometimes how Vesky and Urosh can be. That's kind of what they are for Auburn. And Vol fans love Tennessee's players like that. Opposing fans hate those players, and that's kind of what K.D. Johnson and Cardwell are going to be, I think, in this game for Vol fans. Defensively, we've already talked about how elite Walker Kessler is at blocking shots, and he's a huge reason why Auburn is just ranks, I think, number one. They're number one in the entire country. They're number one in SEC play, and I think in the entire country in blocks per game. But Auburn's whole team really is really good defensively, and they've been very strong all year, and especially, I wouldn't say maybe not especially, but they've just been good all year. They've very rarely had a bad game this season. On Ken Palm, Auburn's offense ranks 8th in efficiency on the season and 9th in the entire country in effective field goal percentage defense. So they've been just, again, really good all season. A huge reason for that, not surprisingly, is because of the post defense by Kessler. Auburn has the number 1 field goal percentage defense in SEC play, with teams only hitting 38.2% of their shots overall against Auburn this entire season. And that includes the number 1 2-point percentage defense, with teams only hitting 42.7% of their 2s against Auburn in SEC play. The conference teams are also just making 30.6% of their 3s against Auburn, which isn't awful, but it's still the 5th best 3-point percentage defense in conference play this season. So again, they're top 5 / number 1 in all the defensive, percentage categories in SEC play this season. They have the 2nd best defensive efficiency in SEC play, behind only Arkansas, who Tennessee just played recently, according to Ken Palm. But they also haven't been facing a ton of high-end offenses lately. Tennessee currently ranks 34th on Ken Palm in offensive efficiency, and that will be the highest rated offense on Ken Palm that Auburn has faced in almost 4 weeks. Alabama ranks 12th in offensive efficiency, and Auburn beat them 100-81 at home on February 1st. That's the best offense Auburn has faced before coming in and facing Tennessee. It's the last top 40 offense, I guess you can say, or maybe top 50 offense, actually, I think, too, that Auburn's faced. It was February 1st. Since then, they haven't faced an offense ranked inside the top 50. I think the best one since then, since facing Alabama before facing Tennessee, was 60th. So again, they haven't faced a ton of really great offenses over the last month here, really the whole month of February. And again, they've also struggled in the month of February. I just think it's interesting. Though Auburn's interior defense is very daunting, I don't look forward to that matchup for Tennessee. They have their perimeter defense can be beat, And also, Auburn doesn't really force that many turnovers on average. They're relying on a lot of block shots and stuff, and that's been very effective, but they don't force too many turnovers, which could be good for Tennessee. They have the 5th worst opponent turnover rate in SEC play, according to KenPom. UT, for comparison, has the 3rd best in SEC play when it comes to opponent turnover rate. When Auburn does force turnovers, they tend to have success, though, as they're 19-1 this season when a team has at least 12 turnovers in a game. But if they force less than that, Auburn's just 6-2, which I know isn't a gigantic drop-off, but it is worth noting that 2 of their 3 losses this year have come when they forced just 11 turnovers in a game, and both of those were their SEC losses. So again, worth noting that it's not like, again, Auburn's playing horribly, but there are ways to beat them. They are a beatable team. They've been beaten 3 times, twice by SEC teams and twice on the road. Tennessee is an SEC team who Auburn's playing on the road. On the other side of things here, the Vols defense will be the highest rated defense that Auburn has faced this entire season, technically, at least according to the current KenPom metrics, because Auburn faced LSU back in, I think, late December to kick off SEC play. And at that point, LSU was the number 1 defense on KenPom. Now they're like 4th or 5th, and Tennessee's 3rd. Auburn is just 2-2 this season against teams that are currently ranked in the top 25 of the defensive efficiency ratings on KenPom, with those 2 losses coming to Arkansas and UConn. They lost to Florida. Florida's not been great on efficiency ratings. So that's their worst loss of the season by far, is to Florida. Tennessee, meanwhile, has faced 6 other offenses that are ranked in the top 25 on KenPom, and they've gone 3-3 of those games. And they faced 8 other defenses ranked in the top 25 on KenPom, going 3-5 in those contests. The Vols own 2 wins over top 10 defenses on KenPom, and they are 2-2 against the top 10 defenses overall. So their 2 wins are Arizona and LSU. So again, Tennessee's faced some elite defense. They faced some really tough defenses this year, so that's not going to be anything new when they face Auburn. The new is going to be kind of how they match up in this game. And to kind of build off that here, I think the Vols have the advantage on the perimeter in this game, but where Tennessee's really going to be tested is in the post, because Walker Kessler and Jabari Smith, they are a matchup nightmare regardless of how good you are in the post. But with Tennessee's post players being what they have been this year, not a huge fan of that matchup. Fulkerson is still hurt. According to Rick Barnes on Friday, he has been very limited in practice. He may have said that hasn't practiced at all, possibly. I think he will play in the game, but he only played 6 minutes against Missouri. He's been dealing with a hip pointer issue since he had the injury. He suffered it in Tennessee's last game on Saturday. It was before the Missouri game. So I want to say maybe it's Arkansas. But regardless, I don't know how much he's going to play. How can Urosh do on defense? I think defensively, Urosh can be okay and can maybe frustrate Walker Kessler down low. But offensively, I don't trust Urosh there. I don't trust Jonas Adu's offense just yet either. I don't really think Brendan Huntley Hatfield has the offense to go up against an elite shot blocker like Walker Kessler. So that's going to be the big thing, is how does Tennessee match up with those guys? And for Jabari Smith, who do you put on him? If Fulkerson isn't at full strength and can't move, laterally like he needs to, I imagine Josiah Jordan-James will be on him. He's given up some height, but James is a capable defender and is Tennessee's best defender on the court at any given time. I imagine James will be on there. But if James gets in foul trouble in this game, who does Tennessee put on him? I don't know that I trust Huntley Hatfield or Jonas Adu to be able to move and guard Jabari Smith, because if he's out on the perimeter, I mean, he shoots a decent amount of threes, but he can blow by a guy who's going to be standing there lead foot. I don't trust Urosh to guard him out on the perimeter. So it's going to be interesting. Again, I think James will get the assignment. It's going to be a very tough assignment for him and for everybody on him, but who gets him when James isn't in the game and Jabari Smith is in the game? I don't know. That's going to be a matchup nightmare. Both those guys are. But I've already talked a little bit about Adu. I think he's going to be huge on defense. Again, I don't know what he can do or what any of Tennessee's posts can do on offense, but defensively, I think Adu is going to be important in this game. I think he's going to have a good game. He's been really effective on the floor for Tennessee, especially defensively and on the glass lately as well. He played a grand total of 15 minutes in 6 games prior to Olivier Camois getting hurt. I mean, he played 2 minutes in that game against South Carolina as well. But counting that one where Olivier Camois got hurt and is expected to be out for the season, Adu played 15 total minutes in 6 games. But since that injury, Adu has averaged almost 15 minutes a game over UT's last 5 games including playing a season-high 23 minutes in the Vols road win against Missouri this week. So he's been asked to do a lot more, and he's been doing a pretty good job of it. And in those 5 games, he's blocked a total of 6 shots in that stretch and has averaged 3.6 points and 4.6 rebounds in his basically 15 minutes a game. But he's been very effective off the bench for Tennessee, especially defensively. He's also made all 6 of his free throws he's attempted, which I was kind of surprised to see it when I went back and looked at his stats. He's not missed a free throw this season, so that's pretty impressive. He's 6 of 6 in his free throws when he's been in the game over his last 5 games. And to wrap up here, it looks like Kennedy Chandler for Tennessee, thankfully, is on a hot streak here and is playing some of his best ball and playing more comfortably right now. Over his last 3 games, he's only totaled 2 turnovers in those 3 games, while racking up 14 assists in that same span. So that's a 7-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. Perfect. That's incredible. That's what you want, ideally, from a point guard in a high major school in college basketball. Over his last 5 games overall, Chandler is averaging 15 points, 3.8 assists, 5.4 rebounds, which is pretty impressive, and 2 steals while making 36.8% of his threes and shooting 52.6% overall from the floor. If you look at a little even micro inside those 5 games, in his last 3 games, he's putting up 17 points per game, 5.3 rebounds, 4.7 assists, and 1.7 steals while connecting on basically 43% of his threes and 52.8% of his overall shots. So he's been playing really well lately, and that's really good news for Tennessee because elite point guard play is going to take you far in the postseason. And I think in this game, especially with the way Auburn's guards have been playing lately, if Chandler, Ziegler, and Santiago Vescovi can outplay Auburn's guards, that's really going to help Tennessee on offense and probably defense too, and take some of the pressure off those post players. Because if Tennessee can hit some threes in this game, that negates Walker Kessler because you're not trying to drive in the paint. And obviously he can jump out and block shots, I'm sure, on the perimeter too. But, the more damage Tennessee can do on the perimeter, the better. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts below. I think there's a decent chance Tennessee wins this game. I feel more comfortable about this game maybe than I should, but more than I have maybe against Kentucky recently, which was, in hindsight, I should have felt pretty good about that game, but I was really worried about that one, even it being in Thompson Bowling for Tennessee. Crowd's going to be amazing. If you're going to the game, I'm jealous of you, and please be very loud. Scream at Bruce Pearl, scream at Stephen Pearl, scream at all the guys out there on the court. Don't be disrespectful and don't be crazy, but, do what you can to make Thompson Bowling Arena a madhouse for Auburn and make it the best / worst, I guess, for them road environment they've played in all season. So again, leave your comments down below. Would love to know your thoughts on this game and how you think it's going to go, what you think the matchups are for Tennessee and how that plays out and everything. Would love to hear your thoughts and predictions. Again, like this video, share it, subscribe to our YouTube channel while you're here, and go listen to our podcast. We would really appreciate all of that. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, I'm Nathanael Rutherford here with Vol Basketball Fever. This has been another Vol matchup breakdown video.